Hey, Marcus.
Do you want to just introduce yourselves to our audience? Why don't you, do you need to be wearing your masks? Or
no, well, basically, yes, but we're in the office on our own, and so we can take them off now.
I don't trust him.
Come on, take it off.
When he talks loud, it's all coming out.
Or we could do the 2 meters distancing, in which case I wouldn't see either of you. I just see the wall.
We go offside.
I'm kind of customizing it before I take it off. I got to show this.
What's the badge?
It says Hatsukoi, which means first love. So it's very appropriate that my first love these days is my mask. But I'll take it off now. It's okay.
Thank you. Hey. Oh, that's who you are.
Mark Dytham.
Astrid Klein.
Hang on, Astrid. I didn't realize it was going to be you. Surprise! We could actually, the series could be people come on with masks and I have to try and guess who they are.
Guess who they are.
No, it's really convenient actually, because you can yawn, you can kind of do all sorts of stuff behind the mask, and also when kind of listening to presentations, PechaKucha presentations, it was quite moving, and of course then you kind of I start crying. I'm a bit of a crier, and but behind a mask and all that, you're really beautifully camouflaged. Nobody notices.
Well, the worst thing with them is with the face unlock on your phone. It doesn't recognize you. So there you are at the convenience store, you hold it up and it just doesn't want to unlock, and you remember your passcode. So you got to find a way around that. It's a little bit inconvenient. Yeah, I wish I had the old touch button, not the face sensor. Anyway.
So welcome to Screentime, which is Virtual Design Festival's live interview format series. You're the second guests on the show. We had Li Edelkoort.
Thank you so much.
Yesterday. So just introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're speaking from.
So yeah, Astrid and I, we met at the Royal College of Art way back when. We've been in Japan over 30 years. We worked for Toyo Ito before we set up our own office here in Tokyo. We've got an office of 25 staff. Yeah, we do anything from interiors to fairly major buildings these days, which is kind of cool. And we used to run, it's just on a bit of a pause at the moment because they're redeveloping the building, but we ran an art space called Super Deluxe for many years. And in Super Deluxe, we came up with PechaKucha, PechaKucha as you might say over there, that show and tell format, 20 slides, 20 seconds, which has taken the world by storm. It's now in over 1,220 cities. And as you may know, we had a big event this morning around the world. Yeah, that's who we are and what we do.
And today we're collaborating with PechaKucha. We live streamed one of your first, I think it was your first virtual global PechaKucha
yes, absolutely.
Event last night. I must admit, since the live stream started at 3 a.m, I missed it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what happened last night in European time, and also a little bit about what PechaKucha is and how big it's become.
Yeah, so as I say, we started PechaKucha in 2003 as a one-off event at the dawn of digital photography and Keynote on the Mac. And in our office, we for the last 17 years, we have had a Monday morning meeting, and we always put, I always do this, it's like I'm putting slides in a carousel. Remember carousels and slides? So we have a Monday morning meeting, people show and share where they've been, if they've been on site or been to a factory or what they did at the weekend. And because you don't have to put slides in a carousel, you put images into a PowerPoint on the server, it's really easy to share. And we get quite excited each Monday morning about what people have done, what's going on site. And when we had our art space Super Deluxe, we had a few dead nights. And so we had to find some way to fill those up. So we invented an event, a show and tell. And yeah, we decided it'd be great to get other people to show and share their work, what they've been up to. But you know what architects are like and designers, they talk and talk and talk, especially about that boring handrail detail. So we came up with this very simple format, 20 slides, 20 seconds, the next person's on, we'll have 10 speakers. Those 10 speakers will bring 5 friends, so that would help fill the space up. We had a one-off event, it was super successful. And then people started saying, we'd like to show our work. And 17 years later, not only is it in Tokyo, it's spread now around the world to 227 cities today, yeah, which is kind of amazing.
And we should tell our audience a little bit about our relationship as well, because I met you guys in Tokyo, what, 15 years ago, something like that?
Exactly, yeah.
I came to Super Deluxe with Max Fraser. We saw PechaKucha, and then we were one of the first people to take it out to Japan, and we were running nights in London about.
That's right, amazing. At the ICA, and I think it was the fastest selling event ever at the ICA, a sellout in 30 minutes or something. Amazing. So yeah, and I think Icon magazine invented the logo for us as well. Yeah, when you were editor of Icon back in the day. Yeah, there's all sorts of great stories there.
We did. But, we took your intro movies, and we thought these aren't very good, actually.
Exactly.
So
well, I think you helped.
We improved them.
I mean, you organised the biggest PechaKucha in the world at that point, like, you know, at Sadler's Wells Theatre. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah. And
that was pretty cool.
An even bigger one in Japan, just not to be outdone.
Exactly.
And
So,
by the way, did I tell you the story about when you did the huge one at the stadium in Tokyo? Was that like 12 years ago or something like that?
Yeah.
And I spoke. It was just after I'd lost my job at Icon magazine and started Dezeen. And I spoke about how I was being a bit of a show off, actually, how my website now had more readers than the magazine I used to edit. And in the audience was one of the co-founders of Airbnb. And I met him a few years later, and he said to me, you know, Marcus, I found that talk really, really inspiring. I thought, isn't that amazing that someone can just pick themselves up and launch something really amazing? And I was like, you've done a little bit better than me then, haven't you? But I did play a part in inspiring the Airbnb.
Well, there's a funny story there, because that co-founder of Airbnb, one of the two, was a furniture designer, and he presented 3 or 4 times at PechaKucha in San Francisco before he blew up the air mattresses for Mac World, and then made an app, and Airbnb became Airbnb. So he's presented in Tokyo as well, which is really, really fantastic. You know, so some really great connections and great stories over the years.
Where did we go wrong, guys?
I know. But we should just talk about the event we had this morning or last night with you. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So after the earthquake here in Japan, which is 9 years ago, you know, really devastating earthquake. At that point, we had 600 cities around the world, and we suddenly realized that this network was extremely important. Everybody was very concerned about us, and everybody was asking, is there some way we can help? And Japan had really inspired the world with its design and culture. And we thought it'd be really nice if the world could inspire Japan back at that difficult moment in time. So we came up with this idea of Inspire Japan. And we had an event 4 weeks after the earthquake and tsunami. And you know, we had over 100 events around the world on one day, and we raised $100,000 for Architecture for Humanity. And this Inspire project took off, and we've been recording people's experiences, what's happened, all sorts of different things. And we're still putting presentations, Inspire Japan presentations, into the archive. And then that spread just after we had the earthquake in Japan. There was a big earthquake in Christchurch, so we've got Inspire Christchurch, Inspire Nepal, and obviously when this sort of pandemic sort of started to really go off, we wondered if we could come together and do something else.
I mean, with PechaKucha, we always thought that there's so many creative people out there, and you know, that creative power would be nice if we could harness it for something more than just you know, a good night PechaKucha night out. And so the Inspire series, I mean, in those sad and tragic times, I mean, people need a little bit of a respite, and so kind of PechaKucha was the perfect vehicle to provide that to the people. But also we always say that you know, we are the last responders, because PechaKucha then kind of tells the stories of not only how how it was, but how about reconstruction and the positive stories that come out of the disaster. And somehow it's a bit similar right now, where there's a lot of tragedy and sadness and anxiety, and people can only take that much, but also designers, architects, and in general, they are problem solvers. And so when there is this big problem, this is when we can kind of get into gear and find creative solutions. So
and today's present.
I am listening to it. I'm just trying to text my son to get him to turn music down in the kitchen. The floor's vibrating, but carry on talking.
Yeah, so we had some amazing presenters today, and from all around the world. We had San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Tokyo, and Wuhan. It's kind of funny, Dana used to be an intern with us at PechaKucha. She was at Temple University here in Tokyo. And she went back to the US and was studying. And for Chinese New Year, she went back to Wuhan to see her parents and got locked in for 76 days, could not leave her apartment. Yeah. So she had a really fascinating and positive story to tell. Yeah. Wuhan's a city of 11.6 million people. And so how does that city function? How does it get food? How do people, how does it operate in a lockdown? So she had some many interesting and positive stories. Yeah. The most important thing was she bought a trampoline to have in her room, which she exercised inside a small little round.
Got to have some tall ceilings. I don't think it works in Japan too well, but anyway.
So that was super interesting. And then Carl Bass, the former CEO of Autodesk, was speaking. So he retired from Autodesk, and he's got a workshop where he makes all sorts of things, and he's been making the face masks too. But he's been using those caps that all those big American companies. He's based in San Francisco, so Salesforce and all these people have got caps. They donated him the cap, and then he put the acrylic around the front. Yeah, some really positive and interesting stories. So they'll be all online in the next few days.
Well, the live stream is on Dezeen.
Oh, there's already, you can already see them immediately.
Yeah. So if people are wondering what this live stream PechaKucha from last night is all about, if they scroll down the homepage of Dezeen about that far, it's all there. And actually today is turning into kind of Tokyo Day on Dezeen, because we also ran a post earlier about Tokujin Yoshioka's design for a face shield. And we've got a series of videos from Martin Vermeulen, the kind of YouTuber who runs around Tokyo making little movies about buildings in the city. And I think you know him, right?
We know him very well. In fact, he's given several PechaKucha presentations. So yeah, the 1 minute architecture, really fantastic. So excellent, nice and efficient, just like PechaKucha.
Yeah. So how is it living in Japan these days in the time of coronavirus? I mean, Japan was less impacted than many other places.
It's kind of interesting. It's only just really picked up. I was in China a couple of really early in January and came back, and we were just talking about it then. And then it'd been quite quiet here, and it's quite strange because Chinese New Year, a lot of Chinese people come here at the end of January, and so it really didn't take off. And I really do think that these masks, we wear these masks in the winter. If you've got a cold and you're on a subway, you wear them to stop giving your cold to someone else. Yeah? And so there is a culture of wearing these. That you don't bow. You don't shake hands. You don't hug. You don't kiss in public anyway. And you bow. So it's a very non-contact environment. And there's because of SARS and other things. There's always sanitizer in stores and by lift buttons. There's a sanitizer by lift buttons. That's where you pick up most disease. Everybody's pushing the lift buttons.
Yeah. I mean, they're really ugly bottles. So you notice them and said, I wish somebody would design more beautiful ones, but maybe now's the time.
Yeah, there's going to be many of those. But I just want to say one more thing about the healthcare system here. It's very local and friendly. going to see a doctor here is like going to see your uncle, or certainly our doctor. And you can pop in, our kids take their health card and they pop in themselves, and it's very accessible. It's you pay a lot of money in our bills and things, but it's super accessible compared to anywhere else I've lived. And that means that people walk in, and I think they've got a very good handle on who has the virus and who doesn't.
Yes, so that's the good side of it all.
Okay, that's why there's two of us here. Yeah.
And the not so good side.
I mean, we've been kind of listening to the news from all around the world, and so we kind of here in the office anyway. We started pretty early on to say, you know, please do not come with public transport, because, you know, people are totally cramped in buses and trains in the morning commuting. And so some people had to start working from home because they live too far away for us to pick them up. Mark has turned into KDA taxi.
So yeah, so the rule is that no public transport, no taxis. So if you've got a car, or I can pick somebody up, or the four people in the office have got cars, or you come by bicycle, then you can come. But you wear a mask when you're in the office. No eating out, and no new friends is kind of the rule we've got.
Lots of hand sanitizers and wiping down tables, door handles, switches, copy machines and coffee machines.
And so about a third of the office are in, and the other two thirds are out. Yeah, and we swap them in and out as much as we can. Yeah. So our office is still functioning in some way, shape, or form, but we're taking, you know, mega precautions.
And lots of conference calls.
And how is the scene in Tokyo these days? I mean, I used to come to Tokyo every year for the design events there, but haven't been for many years now. And I think there's a sense in the West that things are a bit quieter than the crazy days of, you know, 10, 15 years ago. But what's the culture like? What's the architecture and design culture like? I mean, obviously the whole country was gearing up towards the Olympics. That was something that I'm sure you're all starting to anticipate. But how is the mood in Tokyo in the creative sector?
Right now, very quiet, obviously. But I think there was already a kind of a generational shift in a way after the big earthquake, where the younger generations, they became much more entrepreneurial and more you know, startup-y and self-sufficient. And because how do I say this? Because you know, it doesn't take much to kind of make people happy when they have nothing. It kind of led to people being actually quite happy with less, and kind of more low-costy interiors. And so I think compared with 15 years ago, it's definitely a more frugal design scene, I think.
And more content driven, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's less about the style or the actual design, and more about what the architecture, what the interiors actually do. You know, we're more interested in the chef and the materials rather, or the cooking materials, the food, rather than the interior. Yeah, and so you know, so design is taking a little bit of a step back in a way, and that was because of the earthquake and tsunami, I think.
That's interesting, because we could maybe compare that to what's happening now with coronavirus. I mean, people can't go out shopping. People are concerned about paying the rent and getting by. And so there's a kind of enforced frugality being imposed on us. And Astrid, you were saying before the call that you saw the interview I did with Li Edelkoort yesterday. What do you think about her predictions about kind of the whole notion of a quarantine of consumption and resetting things and living a more simple life? Do you think we're going to come out of this and it will continue to be more like that, or will people just like fifth gear as soon as they can?
I always like what Li was saying anyway, so I just hope she's right. And I mean, I can only talk for myself, and yes, you don't need that much, and but what you have, you should enjoy. Yes, you know, as long as you have your favorite cashmere and your great glasses. I mean, if that brings you joy, Marcus, then so be it. It's all good by me. But that's all I'm saying. I mean, you don't need 10. You just my grandma used to say, I'm too poor to buy cheap things. So that gave me the pass, but
actually, I'm wearing this because I wore a white shirt yesterday. I went to the cupboard to see what I was going to wear today, like 3 minutes before the interview started. Realized I had no other ironed shirts. So even though it's very warm here in London, I put on a cashmere jumper.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you've been listening to the podcast series that we've been doing, but we interviewed both David Chipperfield, which has been published, and John Pawson, which is going to be published on Tuesday. And both of them came to Japan when they were young, worked with architects and designers, and really came away with a profound sense of beauty and dedication and professionalism, and picked up a lot of, not necessarily the work, although with both of those you can see a sort of Japanese minimalist influence, but more about a way of doing things that influenced a kind of generation of creatives in the West. If a young aspiring architect was to come to Japan these days, what would they come away with? Would they be the next John Pawson, or would they be something completely different, do you think?
I think the times are different. I mean, you have the internet now, so you know, there's lots out there that can be seen. So I think it might be difficult because you all of a sudden you know, you're not special anymore because you just among lots of architects all around the world.
There's a funny story there, because when Astrid won the Richard Rogers Scholarship at the Royal College of Art, and I grew up near Milton Keynes, and I won this Milton Keynes Development Corporation Scholarship. We both won £2,500 each, and we've been interested in Japan. I wrote my little proposal for travel money to Milton Keynes Development Corporation about Japan. We came out to Japan together. And that's all well and good, but we wanted to contact 10 architects and see if we could find work, you know. But there's no internet. Where do you find addresses for people you know, it was just impossible. You go to the bookstore, there's no books, there's no library. So I'd been doing some part-time work at SOM and chatting to Roger Coleman, and he said, well, I know David Chipperfield, he's been to Japan, you know. So he set up lunch, and then David very kindly brought along a bunch of business cards, which were photocopied, and that was our key to Japan. And George Kunihiro was this card was circled, and George was still good friends with George. Yeah. George was working at Ando's office, and then he helped us find people's addresses, and off we went.
David Chipperfield said, "This guy,
this guy, he knows. So yeah,
it's funny.
Thank you, David.
When I started Dezeen 13.5 years ago, I never really quite knew why, but the audience in Japan was one of the first audiences that got the whole concept of it. Right. Japan for a long time was my biggest audience. And I remember being in Miami for Design Miami. It must have been 2007 or something like that, maybe even 2007, and being in a little guest house. And at the next table, sitting at breakfast, was Tokujin Yoshioka. I kind of vaguely knew to say hello to, but not that well. And I was sitting at my little table with my laptop open, and he was sitting at his little table with his laptop open. And we both realized that both of us were looking at Dezeen. And he sort of went, "Are you Dezeen?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "I love Dezeen. I love Dezeen." And then he sent me a really beautiful handwritten letter a couple of months later that said something like, "Spring is arriving in Tokyo. The cherry trees are coming out in blossom. I want to thank you for bringing delight into my life." It was amazing.
Oh, lovely.
Like a typed but signed letter about how much this crappy little blog meant to him.
Well, as I said, we wrote to, so after we got the golden business card, we wrote to 10 architects, Ando, Ito, Izozaki, Maki. We wrote them letters, sent them portfolios. We didn't get any replies, but we were told they'd got our correspondence. Give them a call when you arrive, if you arrive. So we arrived, call them. Every single architect saw us personally. Now you imagine a Japanese architect writing to the UK or to the US. Back then, no chance. So we're always very respectful of people that visit. But now it's much easier. Just put Klein Dytham Architecture into the internet, and our address and the picture of our office comes up. So interesting.
Would that still happen? Do you think? Would they still find the time to see people that come over? But I suppose it was not so often that people from the West did come over in those days.
No, not really. No.
So when we joined Ito's office, we were like the first Western people to work there, and it was an office of 8 staff. So it was a big deal employing us as well, both of us as well. So times are a little bit different, but we always, so if people write to us politely, we always try and make time.
Yeah, just because we know what it means. So
now we're going to have a flood of them, aren't we? But anyway,
no.
But if people just walk through the door,
addresses are. You can just
we get a lot of requests from India, believe it or not. I don't know. We seem to be very popular in India.
Well, I was actually, that's interesting because, as I said, when we first started Dezeen, Japan was the big audience. Then it became the UK, and then it became the US. But India now is suddenly, it's our 3rd biggest audience from nowhere 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's USA, UK, and then India.
And it's quite funny, all the portfolios we get from India, the paper's generally black with white ink. Yeah, it's kind of weird, and lots of very green trees. But it's always like the reverse of everywhere else, So there's the Indian portfolios coming in, So.
So tell us a little bit about the architecture projects you're working on. What's going on? What are the kind of things you're doing? You mentioned you're working in China. Just give us an overview of what the office is.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that, there's been a definite slowdown of our work in Japan. That's all I can really say at the moment.
Well, that's because we're doing a lot of hotel work. We have a very good client who has lots of hotels. And there was this big rush for the Olympics, and the tourism, the inbound tourism was that the numbers were going up and up and up, and they were expecting how many million?
They were expecting 40 million this year. Yeah. Tourism, I just saw in the Japan Times today, tourism is down 94%. Yeah. So we have a hotel on site at the moment, which is going up for the Olympics. And so that will just, we're still going flat out to get that finished on schedule. But generally, just like everybody else, they're kind of reconsidering, going forward, whether their target audience is going to be a different one, and do we need that many rooms, or do we make a smaller scale, different kind of hotel? So it's a big. It's time for them to kind of think a little bit better about new strategies, and so in the meantime, we're on hold. Yeah, they've said that they're having a rethink, and they may come back to us. The projects have not stopped. There's still a conversation going on. Whereas in China, we've got 4 projects running in China at the moment. Everything's just back to normal, unbelievably. And although we were on a sort of slow pace for six weeks, everything needs to be open on the original day, as if nothing had happened. And we can't go there, we can't meet them.
One of a good problem to have, Mark.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of ironic that the China work is keeping us afloat. But we're doing a big, large, a very interesting project in Xi'an, and I can't tell you too much about it. It'll be opening this December, but it's building on all of our experiences of bookstores and hotels and galleries and things like that. So we're really excited that's going to be opening on the 12th of December, come rain or shine, you know. And there is a positivity in well, there's a different positivity in China, and there's always been, and it is very much a new China, and our clients are you know, very sophisticated now, and you know,
when in Japan, I always say that Japanese people are really perfectionists, and they think things through, and it takes twice or three times the time to have meetings about something. And whereas the Chinese, they kind of they're just much more go for it, and sounds like a good idea, yes, let's do it, sort of, and see what happens.
A little bit like Japan was 30 years ago when we first came here. There was just an acceptance of new things here, where we used to, in England, it was just be really slow. It's a new material. Has anybody used it before? No, but oh dear, well, you know, what are we going to do? Whereas in Japan,
is it going to last?
Is it going to last? You know, and in Japan, it's like, is that a new material? Yes. Has anyone else used it before? No. Great. Let's have a go. You know, that was the energy here then. Yeah. It's sort of wilted a little bit, but there is always this challenge and passion for the new in Japan. Yeah. Whereas in Japan, where in China, I think it's a passion for fast. I think as far as we can say at the moment. But
were you in Japan for the bubble time, or did you arrive after that
yes.
crazy era?
It was just towards the end of bubble time, 88. Yes, I think Zaha still had her projects in Japan, and so had Richard Rogers.
Tobias Scarpa.
Yes.
Yeah. And Mario Bellini was building here. Philip Stark, so Flamdora just finished. But we can change economies, because as soon as we opened our office, you know, it generally happens with us. We just expand, and then Lehman shock happens, you know. So, but anyway.
And how's the drone, Mark? You were it featured in our elevation movie about
drones are still good. What can I say without getting arrested? I fly quite a lot in Tokyo, and I'm very careful. We're flying it over our new project, which is right near the Imperial Palace. So all of the alarms go off, which you just press cancel and you're fine. I don't fly it that often, but I was seeing that Edmund is flying his drone in London a lot at the moment, because there are no planes and nothing flying over the city. So I think it's quite safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have thought there'd have been more conversations about drones. I know there was a thing about Amazon delivering by drones at the moment. But
I think a lot of people disappointed by all the talk.
Yeah, all the talk and no more. But
it's a new 3D printing, isn't
it? Exactly.
Right.
I wanted to ask you something that always comes up whenever we publish a project, a Japanese house project on Dezeen. People always say, where are the stair rails? Where are the balustrades? Don't they care about their children? So what is it about the building in Japan? Are there much more relaxed building codes? Is there, do people not care if people fall off things? Or how do they get away? How do architects get away with having mezzanines without?
Yeah, so in domestic housing, there's no real regulations for handrails in domestic housing. Okay, so there are guidelines, but they're not enforceable. So the regulations here are quite for some areas. So they're extremely strict in some areas. Other areas they're quite what we call grey, and there's different interpretations of those. So it really is up to the architect's responsibility.
But it also depends who you're facing at the approval office, how amenable the person is or not to your application.
Yeah. So I
tend not to go to the approval office
for various reasons. No, it is quite interesting. Just the same as when you take a building and put a piece of architecture there to be approved. Nobody's bothered what it looks like. Nobody, as long as it fits within the sight line. Let me finish. They fit within the sight lines, and the structure's up to everything is legal. Astrid's going to complain now that they've put the color guidelines in. The only thing it can look like anything you want, but the colors have to be a little bit subdued these days.
These days they back in the day there was no color guideline whatsoever, and not that I want to do a bright pink building, but you know, it's when you're told in snow country that you can't have white because it's not a natural color, then it's like, what? So snow country and you can't have a white building? What the heck?
Yeah, and our project, as I was saying, the hotel we're doing near the Imperial Palace is by a moat, but the moat has got an expressway built on the top of it, over it. There's a column coming down. There's this, and they built the 1964 expressway system for the Olympics over all the waterways, including the moat around the Imperial Palace. So we're next to that. And when we went for the approvals, they said, "Yeah, your building could you make it a little bit more imperial,
more respectful,
more respectful of the moat with an expressway in it." So come on, you know. So anyway,
so if you make your expressway more beautiful, I'll think about it.
Anyway,
and another thing that obviously with we see these incredible private houses being built in Japan, and you think about the Japanese, you're talking about, you know, the kind of the politeness and the whole culture there. But then people commission these crazy houses where you can see the toilet from the street and where there don't seem to be any internal walls, and where you could die if you took one wrong step on the way to the kitchen. So what is it? There's a kind of, I noticed that when I was in Japan, there's a kind of incredible quirkiness to Japanese culture, which doesn't really come across unless you're actually there, in a kind of almost, I don't know, is risk-taking the right word, but a willingness to experiment.
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to understand the architecture in Japan. Most of the building, 95% of architecture we call in the West, is actually building in Japan. It's built by the big construction companies and the big housing manufacturers, and only 5% are built by atelier offices, architects. Okay, so when a client comes to us, they've already dismissed the fact they want a normal house. They want something unusual. And they come to the architect, and the architect is seen as the sensei, the teacher. And if they like what you do, you're generally given completely free rein. Yeah. And that's what leads to these really quirky projects.
But they're not the norm. They're just like a 3% or something like that.
Yeah, but it's still quite a lot considering the size of Tokyo. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, we're doing a big house at the moment. And it's not a completely free rein, is it? But it's quite unusual, so good fun.
And then one of the videos that Martin Vermeulen, the 1 Minute Architecture guy, has given us to publish in the next couple of days is about how earthquakes and the fires that often follow earthquakes have really influenced the layout of cities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had no idea that the reason, apparently they have these massively wide roads, but then these kind of almost villages
inside,
that the roads are kind of fire clear.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So two things. One is some of the major roads have roads that should be clear for when there is an earthquake, so they can get supplies in. But each city block, they allow a 12-story concrete architecture around the block, and then within that block, all the wooden houses remain, and are only 2 or 3 stories, and they're really close together. So these are the fire breaks within the city. You know, it's been, you know, and fire is the biggest problem after an earthquake. The buildings are incredibly strong and well built here, and won't just collapse in an instant. The problem is that fire breaks out, and that's been really the issue. The great earthquake of 1923 was really Tokyo was destroyed because of fire, not because of the earthquake.
And before I went to Tokyo, I thought of it as this incredibly busy city because you see those big multi-lane highways, but as soon as you get off them, it's beautiful, calm, serene, village-like atmosphere.
Extremely quiet as well in some of these places.
I mean, I live pretty central, but at night the street, I live between Shinjuku and Aoyama. And so you would think it's like a lot of traffic. It's kind of central, but at night it's like a dead street. It's really quiet.
In fact, Astrid lives right next to the new Olympic Stadium, so I think this time next year it's going to be really, really
I
busy.
wish I wouldn't live there. No, the idea was that
yeah, exactly.
The idea was that when my daughter was born, I grown up in the countryside. I said, "Oh dear, she's not going to grow up in this big city. That's no good." And so I made an extra effort to move between two big parks. So we have Meiji Jingu Park here and Shinjuku-gyoen here, and Sendagaya in the middle. So it was only 5 minutes to each, so there would be a lot of green. It was reassuring.
And since we seem to have moved on to kind of peculiarities of Japan, final question, Mark, I notice on your social media feeds, often you show pictures of the incredible precision parking. These kind of people carriers that have somehow got into these garages with literally millimeters to spare on either side. I mean, how do they do that?
Well, there's a door on the other side, Mark, so I just don't take a picture of that one. So they hodge across. But yeah, it is amazing. And I'm actually quite a good precision parker myself. So I go around when I'm out for a run. I stop, and that's my excuse why it guys take so long when I go for a run, because I'm taking pictures of the precision parking. But it is incredible what they managed to squeeze their cars into. So yeah, but remember, if you look at all my pictures, remember that I've only shot the side that's closest to the wall, not the side where the guy just opens the door.
Right. So otherwise we're going to ask, how do they actually get out of the cars? They drive in. They can't actually open the doors. All right, guys, it's been great speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks. For
and I just want to congratulate you on this initiative too, because I think it's super important with all these cancellations around the world, not just only design festivals, but also degree shows and things like that. So congratulations and good luck with the rest of the festival.
Thank you very much. And hope to see you soon in the real world.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks, Marcus. Okay, bye-bye.